How's it going, everyone? I'm Adam and welcome back to the channel. Now, it's fair to say for the last 8 or 9 months things have been incredibly quiet. I've not posted a single video, and for very good reason. I've had a lot of big changes go on for me, which I will share with you guys in a later video. But what I really want to do is pick things up where we left off all them months ago with the Corsa VXR. Now, when we finished the last video, we'd stripped out the engine and we had torn it apart, ready to go off to the machine shop. And after I finished that video, I took the engine off to the machine shop. So let's get into today's video, and I will share with you in a later video everything that has gone on for me, all of the changes. But right now, let's get back to the Corsa. I'm back at home now, and I'm going to clean up the valves and everything that attaches to the head so that I can lap them when the head comes back. Now, I've already done the inlet valves and given them a good cleanup, and you can see the difference that they have from the exhaust side. So I'm going to work on the exhaust side next. And I've also picked up a lapping kit from Halfords. It was only £7, but it's got the fine paste and the coarse grade paste along with the lapping tool. And I found the best way to get this done was just to connect them into a cordless drill and running it backwards and forwards with a mildly abrasive pad. Now, these are used valves, and I'm just trying to clear off years of built up carbon from the exhaust port, and hopefully they'll be fine to use. I don't know, we'll soon find out when we go and rebuild the head, but fingers crossed we can use these again. So once all of the valves were cleaned and decarboned, it was then onto the head itself. And right now I'm just putting in the new valve stem seals, just pressing them down with a small socket just to make sure they seat properly. And then we can flip the head over and we can start working on lapping those valves. And with the powers of editing, there we go. So the head is now turned over and we're starting to lap the first valve. Now, all I'm using is the fine grade paste on this one because these have already been lapped when the engine was made, and I'm hoping I haven't got to grind away too much. So it's just a little bit of lapping paste, but I tell you what, the lapping tool is useless. It kept disconnecting, so it took a lot longer than this edit here, but we got the job done. So now that I've reassembled the head, and prior to putting it all together and getting the cams back in, what I've done is I've flipped the cylinder head over. I have filled all of the ports with water just to check that they are holding and there's no leaks. There is absolutely nothing coming out, no water whatsoever on both intake and on the exhaust side. So that I'm really happy about. It just means now that I know that the valves are sealing, they're good, there's no leak. Now that that's done, I need to get it dried out, flip back over, then I can start installing the cams. And then the head is then almost ready to go back together with the rest of the engine when that's assembled. But we're making progress now. We're starting to move forward with this engine, and I'm really hoping to get this thing running very soon. So let's get back to the build right now. So now we have the block connected up to the engine stand. We can take the end caps out, one final clean, and we can go ahead and drop in the crankshaft. And just like that, with the crankshaft in, we can get the bearings and the end caps on, get them tightened down, and then we can start building up the rest of the engine. And at this point, once we've got the caps in, Paul gave it a good turn to make sure everything was turning freely, and I think that was where he started to get just a little bit excited. Whoa. So, Conrad bearing cap, crankshaft bearing caps, 50 Newton meters, plus 45 degrees, plus 15 degrees. It would appear at this point that Paul wasn't convinced.
Normally it's just a talk setting and that's it.
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. But after a little bit of convincing, he finally agreed, and we went ahead and talked them all down to spec. And then That gave us the opportunity to turn the crank one final time, make sure everything was still turning freely, and then we could get on to building up the pistons. And when it came to assembling the pistons, I found from doing the first two that the easiest process was going to be putting one of the C-clips in first and then a little bit of lubricating oil in the gudgeon pin too. That way when it came to putting it all together, the gudgeon pin slid in easy enough, it didn't go past the C-clip, and I could get the next one in. I did that, went straight onto the fourth piston, and before you know it, they were all done. So as it sits right now, we've got the first piston in the engine. So we've got that sat down and it's circulating through nice and smooth. We've got nothing, no restrictions or anything like that. We've only hand tightened the com rod bolts at the moment until we get everything in, make sure everything runs smooth. Then we'll turn the engine over and we can tighten everything down, torque them to spec. Now these are Nevlock's own con rods that we're using with the pistons, so everything else is just OEM torque specs, but these are 29 foot-pounds of torque, so we'll have to remember that when we get to it. Before we can get the pistons in is measure the piston ring end gap. So I've got my buddy Paul here. Say hi, Paul.
Right.
And we're going to put the two rings. So we've got the top ring, which is the silver ring, the second ring, which is the black ring, and we're going to put them into the cylinder. We're going to measure the ring end gap, and then once we've got that sorted, we can get them onto the piston and then the piston into the block. So first things first, we're going to squeeze the ring in like so, and we're going to use a piston just to level it and make sure we've got it in. And there's the end gap there that we're going to be measuring. So once that's in and seated, I'm going to get an even press on that just to make sure we're happy it's level. All right, and we're looking for, on this particular one, what is it we're looking for? A 0.15 of a mil. All right, so I'm just going to take that 0.15 on the feeler gauge and measure that through. Does that fit okay? Yeah? Yeah. That's good to me. All right, cool. So we know that the top ring is good. We don't have to adjust that or file it down at all. Quite happy with that. Let's take that one out and we'll get the second one in, which is this black one here. So that's just going to sit inside like so. It's a little bit more awkward when I'm holding the camera, but we'll get that one in. That's in. And once that's squeezed down, all right, we can measure that. And this time we're looking for a 0.18 of a millimeter end gap. So again, in there close, and we've got that out on the feeler gauge. How's that? Is that going in?
Yep.
Nice, perfect. So we're not going to have to file any off of this one. So that means that this ring can come out as well. We can assemble it in the piston, and then we can clamp them all down with the piston clamp, and then we can squeeze it into the head. So now the first piston is in, and the other three assembled, ready to go. And with us dropping in the second piston here, the clamp tool makes light work of that, compressing the piston rings and allowing us to slide the piston down into the cylinder. And once the cap is on, we can get the bolts in, hand tighten them up, make sure everything turns freely, and go ahead with the third. And once we had got the third one sorted with the end cap on, we could go ahead and get the fourth and final piston into the engine. And I don't necessarily know if we had done it in the right order in terms of individually putting the pistons in each cap, or whether we should have got them all in together. I don't really think it makes much of a difference. The main thing was that we got them in the right orientation, because each of the pistons had an arrow on them which indicated which direction they should face in the block. So that was the important thing. But once we'd got them in, again, it would be a final turn of the crank and make sure everything was nice and smooth. Next up came the brand new head gasket in place now, then we could drop the head on. So now that we've got the head on top, we've got the head gasket on, we've got the head bolts in, they're not torqued down yet. We have got the torque sheet, so the order, the specifications here, so we start in the middle and we spiral our way out, and we've also got the torque settings. So we start with 25 Newton meters, then 90 degrees, 90 degrees again, 90 degrees again, and then a further 45 degrees, and that's the torque tightening procedure. These are a one-time use bolt, so if we do have to take them out again, we're going to need new bolts, so I'm hopeful we don't have to take them out again. So yeah, let's make a start, let's get these torqued down, and hopefully we're making progress. Okay, so that's 25 Newton meters. Now we've got to go 90 degrees all the way around, so we'll do that. And then we've got to go again and again and again, and eventually we'll get it tight enough. Okay, so they're all done at 90 degrees, so we need to do another 90 degrees. And the next task was to work on rebuilding that turbo. Now, I've never rebuilt a turbo in my life, let alone take one apart. So I made sure that I marked everything to keep it balanced and even, and then that way when it went back together, it would all go in the same place. And a little bit of heat allowed me to get the rest of these components off, and taking out little bearings, little oil seals, and putting them all back in order. And I found the easiest way of doing this was to take them out and place them in a line in order that I took them out. And then when it came to putting the new parts in, it was just a reverse of the taking apart. So it made it a little bit easier. I was just concerned about making sure I kept it balanced when I tightened everything up, and we wasn't going to find a huge failure somewhere further down the road. Now, I'll leave a link in the description down below with the company that I used to buy the turbo rebuild kit from. They have loads available, so make sure to check them out if you need one too. Good morning, and it is now day 2 of putting the engine together, and so far we have made amazing progress. We ran through until about 1:30, or this morning should I say. We had a really late night, but the engine is all assembled now, it's all back together, oil pan on. The only thing we have left to do is the new clutch, which is flywheel, clutch disc, pressure plate, and we've then got the gearbox to do the new slave cylinder and get that mounted up to the engine. But here she is, the engine is all back together and ready to be fitted. It's now off the engine stand. I am so happy. So I think for the first time we've ever assembled an engine for a car, it's yeah, we're like 24 hours to assemble from scratch with no instructions, and we are ready to get it in the car today. So fingers crossed everything goes well on the first start up. We're going to get the clutch assembly on, gearbox on, get the car and the engine married again, and go from there. now the clutch is on, the new slave cylinder and the gearbox is reattached to the engine. Torque down to spec, we can go ahead, clear that engine bay out and get the engine back in. And it was a little bit of a faff to get it back in, if I'm honest. I think we probably had the engine at a bit of an awkward angle, but with a little bit of messing around, a little bit of head scratching, moving the crane up and down, we eventually got it in so that we could get the bolts into the engine mounts and we could start connecting up everything that needed to go back in. And once we'd done that, we could get the slam panel back on, top up the coolant, top up the engine oil, making sure everything was as it should, get the clutch system bled, and then we could go ahead and start to think about getting that engine started. And once we've got everything back in the engine bay and connected up, the only other thing really to think about before we could go ahead and get the engine started was getting those drive shafts in so we didn't end up spewing gearbox oil everywhere. Right, so finally we've got everything back in the car. Paul and I have worked tirelessly for the last 2 days. It's now, what's the time? It's now 20 past 6 on the second day in the evening, so we've done everything to get it back together. It's in the car. Now we haven't got the front bumper and headlights on for obvious reasons. We've got coolant in, oil in, we've checked all the other fluids and levels, the battery's now connected up, but we haven't started the engine. I offered Paul the chance to start the engine. He doesn't want to start the engine first because he doesn't want to be responsible if something goes wrong, so I'm going to start the engine first. Yeah, wish us luck. Let's see how it goes. But bear in mind, you know, this is the first time we've built a car engine and put it together from scratch, and only yesterday morning it was sat in thousands of pieces on my garage floor. So let's see how it goes. Who knows? It's either going to start or it's not, and then we kind of go from there, I suppose. So here we are. It all came down to this one moment. 2 full days, late nights, all to put this engine together. But was it going to start? Who knew? It's the first time we built an engine. We had no idea. We had our fingers crossed, we had our toes crossed, but we didn't know what was going to happen. Nothing. Complete disaster. And this was what we feared the most. After 2 days of working tirelessly to get this engine built, put together and back in the car, it didn't run. And it was really frustrating. We had everything on the dash came up as it should. We just couldn't get the engine to crank. Maybe we'd done something catastrophically wrong rebuilding this engine. So it's fair to say that the first start on the Corsa didn't exactly go to plan. Once we turned the key, nothing happened whatsoever. So after a little bit of tinkering around and fiddling, we managed to find out exactly what the issue was and get it resolved, which I've done now. So now I get to show you the Corsa starting for the first time. Let's get her running. And there she goes. She is running, she's in neutral. However, there is still a little issue. Let's go take a look. Now, it stems from the fact that when the engine's running, it sounds like it's sucking in a load of air. Bear with me. And the reason that I know this is because whilst it sounds a little noisy at the moment, when I undo the filler cap, it's sucking, and there's a lot of pressure behind it. Now that's because I found the leak. Let me show you. If I take the cover off and have a look here, you can see. So we have an air leak from there. I'm going to need to replace the rocker cover here with a brand new one that I've got here. and it's all to do with the diaphragm on the inside, the breather, if you like, that goes through. So I'm going to get this one taken off, a brand new one put on, and then we can send it for its MOT tomorrow.
And so this particular task was going to prove nice and easy. After removing the coil pack, it was just loosening all the bolts that go around the outside of the rocker cover, lifting it out and placing the new one in, making sure to fit the gasket beforehand, and then the reverse of everything to take it out. And to finish off, we put the coil pack back in.
And that is the rocker cover replaced with a brand new gasket on it as well. We'll take a look at the other one in a moment, but what I'm more interested in doing right now is firing this up, make sure everything is as good as it should be. And let's give her another try. Let's see. And she fires up perfectly well. Now we've got still the service light on there, so we're going to have to get that sorted. Now everything sounds better. I can't hear the sucking noise that we were getting. That's now no longer drawing air in, so that's running way better. I'm well happy with that. We've got a nice seal all the way around. That's another job well done. And it was all to do with in here. Now if I flip this one over, you can see on the old rocker cover, it was actually an issue on here with the breather inside. Now you can replace just this section and hot glue gun them back in, but I didn't really want to get into that, and for the sake of a brand new rocker cover, now okay, this is an OEM, this is a genuine fake rocker cover, but it was 33 quid as opposed to 145 pounds, so I'm happy with that. It's going to have sealed the job and done the job for us, so on to the next one. Let's get it MOT'd. But you guys are going to have to wait until the next video to find out how we get on with the MOT, whether we pass or fail, and whether we get a thumbs up or a thumbs down from a real mechanic. Now that brings us to the end of today's video, so thank you so much for watching, guys. I also want to give a huge shout out to Paul for all of his efforts, his knowledge and his experience for the last couple of days of rebuilding that engine. Paul, without you, mate, it wouldn't have been possible, and also without you guys watching, there'd be no reason for me to make these videos. And whilst I said at the start of the video there's been some huge changes, I'm going to share all of them with you in the next video also. So smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.